Now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. We'll give folks just a few more minutes to get on here, and I appreciate everybody joining us. All right, I feel like we can probably go ahead and get going, and if anybody else wants to join us, then they can catch up when they get here. So introduce myself real quick. My name's Noah Wharton. I'm the Senior Director of Educational Program, and then also work with our assessment initiatives. And so that's really what we're here to talk about today is we are now kicking off year 4 of our membership outcomes assessment. And I know that some of you have probably heard some of these presentations before and maybe even been involved in some of the conversations about membership outcomes assessment. For some of you, this may be kind of brand new information. And so as we get into this, we'll start off with just some basic overviews and then try to provide you with a little more in-depth updates on what's been going on with this initiative. But I'll probably try to keep it pretty quick here, and I'll try to move through some of these points so that we can really focus on questions, as I know with everyone coming at it from probably a different background and awareness of this, you may have some different things, so we can kind of tailor the presentation to your interests. So as we're going, feel free to chat in some questions and I can address those as we go, or if they are something that will be coming up, down the road in the presentation, we can address that. So I think the first piece to really dig into is the core question of this entire initiative. This really started off with the question of what is the impact of the DU experience. And I think as we're talking about this, we can all identify as some personal anecdotes, right? We have those personal stories. We can all talk about that individual we knew in the chapter that had this phenomenal growth and development throughout their time in the fraternity. But for the most part, it gets difficult to expand beyond the anecdotal, beyond the personal story. And it's not that those things don't have meaning and value, but I think it also doesn't tell the complete story, and it can be hard when you're really trying to communicate the impact and the value of the experience to kind of outside constituents as well as internal stakeholders. They can sometimes fall short, and so that's really where we decided to dive in on this membership outcomes assessment to really kind of look at what is it that our students are gaining from their experience, and also, what are the experiences that are really driving the type of outcomes that we want to attain. So that's where we came up with this idea of the membership outcomes assessment to really, start to measure student behaviors, values, attitudes, to look at, how is it the students are growing and changing over the course of their membership in the organization, and to identify, or to break down exactly what's happening within the chapters and better understand the environment within the chapters, as well as what environments are creating the ideal experiences. We want to see how chapters grow and develop over time. And we wanted this to be something that would have value on the chapter level, and something that could really be utilized, I think, as a complement to the Men of Merit Standards program, where we have now sort of that Men of Merit Standards, which is an evaluation of really operations. And then this membership outcomes is really an evaluation of learning, growth, and development, as well as environment, right? So then we can kind of look at both of these things in conjunction to really have a better understanding of what's happening within a chapter, to then also be able to better meet their servicing needs and to help give information to the chapter that can hopefully help them out in their own planning and development. So that's kind of the bare bones of what it is that we're really looking to accomplish here. So just to give you an idea of some of the nuts and bolts here. So like I said, we are in year 4 of this process. And so that is, I think, particularly exciting because, we've been evaluating some of the same folks every single year for the past 4 years. So now actually that freshman year or first year cohort from that first survey 4 years ago will now have 4 data points throughout their entire continuum in the organization. And so we're really going to be able to start to look at, how do these individuals grow and develop over time? What changes over time? What experiences did they have that had greater impact than others? And in reality, I don't know that anyone has ever developed this much longitudinal data on the impact of the fraternity experience. So we're going to have a lot of information to dig into after we're done with survey collection for this year. And a little more on the survey. I know we get some questions on this. Where does this come from? The way that the actual survey got created was we started with the membership outcomes for the organization. So we identified, here are some things that we think if you're having really an ideal experience within the fraternity, then these are the things that we want you to gain and learn from that experience. And so then to identify if that is actually happening, we had the survey company, Dyad Strategies, that we're working with. They actually identified specific assessment variables and pulled them from different instruments and tools that have been utilized and put together this survey so that we can then map those variables to the specific outcomes that we want to see, that we want to measure. Right? So that's how the survey actually gets put together. We have been, I think, really successful in our response rate in the first 3 years. We've had right at 79% response rate in each of the 3 years across the entire organization, which is a really high level of response rate when you're looking at statistical research and survey research, and certainly speaks to the buy-in from the organization, as well as really the support from chapter leadership, as well as advisors and alumni like yourself who have really driven that response. And what that does is it gives us just phenomenal data. And it also gives us, I think, good confidence that, what this data is saying is accurate, right? That this accurately reflects what members experience, believe, and learn. So that is really great to see. So I know that we've talked in the past about how, we were the original fraternity to do this work, and so that I think was a pretty big point of pride for the organization, and one where we felt like we were really taking leadership in this area. Now, 5 other organizations have signed on with using the assessment. I think 4 out of the 5 have actually gone through data collection. So we've had some communication with some of those other groups. And what's great about that is I think it's going to strengthen the comparison data that we're going to have access to, and we're really going to be able to see kind of, how maybe a specific chapter can compare to kind of now these national averages. And we'll also have some comparisons for ourselves to national averages. And so this just gives us some greater ability to be able to contextualize the data and to be able to just better understand what the data means that we're getting back. So for this year, we are actually right in the middle of data collection right now. As some of you may have seen from some communications, we launched the survey on the 27th. So we launched it on Sunday. We had instructed chapters to have a meeting on Sunday or Monday to deliver the survey and have the survey administered kind of in person. We found that tends to be the most effective way to get chapters to actually just kind of sit down and do it. Just have everybody pull up their laptops, or it can be taken even on a phone or a tablet. Take 30, 40 minutes, fill out the survey, and then you just have it done. You're good to go. I know that I did hear outreach from probably 10 or 15 groups who, didn't have chapter meeting, or maybe had a recruitment activity going on, or recruitment week this week, or, some groups have like a J term or something, so they haven't really started back up yet. A reminder emails sent out so that the guys have it at the top of their inbox when they sit down to take the survey. Also, now we're kind of moving into sort of follow-up period here, as I actually just received this morning an update on who has completed the survey and how many guys from each chapter still need to do it. And so we'll be able to provide that information back out to chapter leadership and advisors to let you know, hey, here's the 10 guys from the chapter that still need to take it, and we can follow up with them and hopefully drive some greater response. It looks like we're probably at about 38-ish%. I haven't fully run through the update yet, but I think we're probably at about a 38% response rate right now, which is a good start. But probably about half of where we want to end up this year is hopefully we'll try to get at about 80% to top that number from last year. And also, I think even more importantly than that, really want to see every chapter above 80%, at 80% or above, because I think that just gives us a much stronger chapter report that we can provide back to chapters, because we actually break it down by chapter. And we'll go over the chapter reports here in a minute just to let you see kind of what some of that can look like. And like the better chapter data we can get for you, the more useful it will be. So that is kind of where we are with survey administration. And we'll go ahead and move on. Feel free to type in questions if you have any questions about some of the survey administration stuff. Let's see, a couple of other things just in terms of, I think, supporting data collection. I think really want to highlight the responses are anonymous. We don't have students' names attached to like specific, or it doesn't get communicated back to anyone in the organization, or we don't report anything out that says, this person responded in X way, and responses are never communicated in an individual manner. Only aggregate data is communicated. So hopefully that can help strengthen their confidence that they can be honest, and really want to highlight that, we want guys to be honest and sincere in their responses. I think, if guys don't take it seriously, then, they're really just kind of wasting their time because they're not providing anything of value back to us or the chapter, but they're still, taking the time to click through it. So if you're going to spend the time clicking all those bubbles, I think you might as well at least make it worthwhile. And it really does have value for us. All the measures are tested and validated. Many of these come from major national and international assessments. So, these aren't just something that we made up on the back of a napkin here, right? Like, this is tested, credible assessment instruments. So hopefully that can also give everyone some confidence in the results there, and confidence that their time will be well spent taking the survey. I think another concern that comes up sometimes I hear is, guys are just going to game the survey or just tell them what they want to hear, right? Which doesn't really do us any good. But also, I think what you realize in the survey design is, I think for the most part, it is kind of game proof to some degree. The questions will be asked in a way where I think it can make it more challenging to try to figure out what the right answer is. And I think in a lot of regard, there isn't necessarily a right quote unquote answer. And there will also be, multiple questions that will feed into one variable. One variable might have 10 different questions associated with it that'll be scattered around. So it's not like, it's just one question that clearly has a good or a bad answer to it necessarily. And also there are some things built in there that help remove bad answers. Like if somebody just goes through and does the pattern of answers, or does just one for every single question or something, then it will actually remove those from the data set. And then also that's part of why we really want to drive a strong response rate, because, if you get 3,000 responses and you have one or two guys that put kind of obscure responses on there that don't really reflect reality, it's not necessarily going to move the overall needle on things. You're still going to have really credible, accurate results. So just a few more thoughts that I want to throw out there based on some questions that we typically get, some concerns that sometimes get expressed about that survey. So enough on data collection. We can come back to data collection if anybody has any questions or anybody's wondering about how they can help out more specifically this year. But wanted to also touch on just some thoughts on kind of what we're learning and what we are kind of starting to glean from the assessment now that we've had a few years worth of data to dig into here. So I think one really key variable that you'll hear us talking about a lot is this belonging measure. And this is one of 4 brotherhood measures that are a part of the assessment. And I think in the last webinar we did last year, we really kind of dug into the brotherhood measures and really kind of broke that down quite a bit. I thought this time we'd spend a little bit less time on that and spend a little more time talking about some of the specific data that we are seeing. But essentially the idea is that belonging is this construct of brotherhood built on the idea that my brothers really value and appreciate me. My brothers have, an understanding of who I am, and value me because of that, or accept me because of that. We really see it tying into a lot of the positive variables that we want to get out of the experience. It really seems to drive affect and commitment to the organization. It really seems to drive kind of the healthier brotherhood environment. And so belonging has become a really key variable that we're trying to emphasize. And we're seeing it as one of the things that if we really focus on this, it's going to move the needle in a lot of other areas. And we're seeing that belonging is really moving in the right direction. We've been on just a a consistent trend upward in our belonging across the entire organization. Clearly within chapters, you've seen some ups and downs there, but across the entire organization, we are tracking in a positive direction there, and we'll continue to emphasize that as a major point. Another major point of emphasis for us has been self-authorship. And this is kind of one of our developmental measures, as I like to call them, looking at some of the developmental outcomes of the organization. And self-authorship is really kind of like a measure of maturity, would be sort of a simplistic way of describing it. You're looking at this concept really describing how members have an understanding of themselves and an internalized sort of definition of who they are and their value system, and a willingness to act on that. And a reason why we're seeing this is important is it is what we've seen as our most predictive variable each year, so meaning that as this variable goes up, we see the most other developmental variables go up as well. And so that has also been going up. Another measure that we have seen trending in a positive direction across the organization has been self-esteem, which I think has been an interesting one to look at. Another interesting one I pulled out is a measure called oral communication anxiety. And this is really basically a measure of interpersonal communication skills and the degree to which members are able to kind of communicate with other humans orally and verbally. And we've seen that trending downward, which is a positive. Kind of the higher score means kind of less developed communication skills. The lower score would mean better developed communication skills. And so as you look at this, and I think this is going to be really interesting once we're able to add in the 4-year data here, but there's some other stuff that we saw some positive trends around, like social perspective taking, which is kind of this measure of kind of understanding others, and there was some stuff around kind of working with others, working in groups, working or collaborating with other people. And so I think you kind of start to be able to put together a story there that through their fraternity experience, these men are developing a better understanding of who they are. They're developing greater confidence in who they are, a greater sense of self-esteem, a greater ability to work with those around them and understand others around them who may not necessarily be like them. And so, that starts to fit a pretty good narrative in terms of what we would want men to get out of a good, healthy fraternity experience towards setting them up for success then in their postgraduate careers. And so I think we're starting to see some of that narrative come together. There's clearly room for growth and areas where we want to continue to emphasize growth and development. But I think we do have some positive signs there. We're also measuring some things on kind of a programmatic level. Just wanted to show you an example of this, because there's a lot that we could dig into here. But this is just one chart from the dual experience. This is the DU Emerging Leaders experience. And so what this is measuring is it is measuring one variable, affective commitment. The red line is members who have attended dual, and the blue line is members who have not attended dual. And so kind of year one is the year before the individual has attended the dual program. Year two would be the measure after they had attended the dual program the previous summer. And so you can see there is a pretty substantial increase there, and performing substantially higher, and kind of a 0.3 difference on this measure on a 5-point scale we're seeing is pretty high. But then even better, we see in year 3, so this would be, a year and a half removed from attending the program, that affective commitment is continuing to go up. And so we're seeing the effect continue. Whereas we'll have some variables where you'll see, you might have a spike in the variable after the program, but then it'll kind of taper off and you'll sort of kind of revert back to the norm, so to speak, unless you have another educational intervention, kind of a reminder, right? Sort of like you would see, some of those measures looking at how learning and retention persists throughout the summer, right? And how much students learn or how much students lose over the course of their summer vacation or something. Similar type of effect here. But when we see this continual upward trend, that would be one that we see as really positive, right? So this would be a good point coming out of the dual experience. Let's see, go the other way here. So another one that we look at, this is also a dual, looking at positive relations with others. And so you see that is also trending in a positive direction and substantially higher than for individuals who did not attend the experience. So that would be another good point that we feel like, yes, this program is delivering on some desired outcomes from the experience. Another way to look at the data, we've been tracking the implementation of our associate member education program. As you can see, this was just a year 1 comparison of the cohort before we implemented the associate member program to after we had implemented the associate member program. We'll be able to kind of get a little more complex with this comparison as we get some more data in here this year, but there was some initial encouraging signs in terms of a reduction and positive movement on some of the hazing attitude scores. We saw a positive movement on the social status importance, which we're seeing as an important variable to track, as that really kind of connects to a lot of some of the more destructive attitudes and behaviors that we want to prevent. And we also saw like a nice increase in belonging, accountability about the same, a good increase in self-esteem, need for cognition, social perspective taking. So we have to see kind of how this continues to play out over time, and this year's data will give us another opportunity to test that. But at least this gives us one data point that shows some positive signs around implementing the associate member education program, and I think needing to, or gives us something to help promote why that program can have value for chapters. So that's another way that we're utilizing the data, and another way that the data is teaching us stuff about our member experience. So now a question could also be, how does this impact you, and how can you learn on the chapter level? And so one thing that we've been providing is we have chapter reports. Like, here's an example of what a chapter report would look like. We'll provide this each summer. So if you have not received a chapter report, I'm certainly happy to provide that for you, and we can provide you with 3 years worth of chapter reports if you'd like to go back and see kind of what has been happening over the course of the last 3 years. But we'll provide that brotherhood scale in a chart that I'd mentioned, the 4 measures: solidarity, shared social, belonging, accountability. We will also include a few points that can be kind of chapter strengths, some things we see as highlights for the chapter, couple things that might be maybe areas for improvement. And then we've also been including what some of the areas of greatest change from year to year have been, as sometimes that can maybe be informative to see maybe where a particular attitude or environmental measure changed significantly, positively or negatively. Then we also provide a little bit of analysis. Clearly, this is focused primarily on some highlights, and in a half page you can only go so in depth, but wanted to provide a little bit of information there to help in interpreting the data and provide a little bit of explanation as to maybe what this might mean, or some thoughts on maybe what the chapter might want to consider as a result of this data, and then include some opportunities for improvement, or kind of some suggestions for things that might help with some of those areas that we identified as targets for improvement based on the data. So that's what we provide back to the chapter. Now, clearly, this is not all of the data, as there's 30 some variables within the assessment, and like providing that to everyone could be a little bit cumbersome and unwieldy. But we do have that available for folks if they're interested, and so we certainly are willing to provide that if that would be of value for any of you, and we can even provide that going back all 3 years, so you can see on each data point how the chapter has evolved over the course of the last 3 years. And then with this year's data collection, clearly we'll be able to add in the 4th year. We'll probably be wrapping up the survey in about 5 weeks. As data collection usually takes a little while before we get everybody on board here and are able to get all the data in the door. And then we are able to get the data back in kind of late May usually, and we get the reports put together in June and July and have those available by Leadership Institute. So just so you kind of know the timeline there. Just some thoughts on maybe what you might do with this when you receive it. I think one important thing to remember is, this report kind of represents an educated opinion as to what the data might mean, right? This is not necessarily like a definitive statement on everything about the chapter experience, but it is a data point that I think can be triangulated with, men of merit data, personal observations, maybe campus evaluations, and other things that can kind of help add some context or maybe reinforce some of the points in the report. I think it's great to use this as a starting point for a conversation, and I think ask, why might this be showing up this way? Why might this be occurring? Or maybe what was happening in the chapter at the time that we took the survey that may have given folks this attitude? And I think that can help to defray. Sometimes folks will get maybe a little bit off put, or they'll get a little bit upset that something might not be the most flattering, or it might not even be bad, but they just will perceive it negatively and will have kind of a defensive reaction. And so I think rather than having that defensive reaction, I think it can be good to really look at this as just an opportunity to have a conversation and think about, let's kind of remove the value judgment from this and go into kind of researcher mode and think, well, what might be happening in our chapter here, and then really, how can we utilize this data to help the chapter improve? Maybe think about what behaviors they might have experienced around this particular point, or maybe was there an incident in the chapter that may have influenced people's opinions? Was there something happening on campus? When you kind of start to break it down in that way, I think sometimes it can become a much more informative tool and a much better process than just trying to get defensive about something. So definitely encourage using this in kind of goal setting and chapter retreats, and utilizing it as a way to inform kind of the plans of the chapter, and also encourage looking at, where are some highlights for the chapter? What are some things that we can really use to promote, things that we can go in and, share with campus administrators, share in our recruitment pitch that, we have actual evidence and data demonstrating some of the positive outcomes from our chapter experience here on this campus. And it's not based on, some national report. It's not something talking about, presidents and senators that we'll never meet. It's actually something saying, this group of 50 guys here on this campus are really learning in this area in a positive way. Right. So I think that can be a good way to utilize the data in a in a productive way. So I just wanted to touch on some next steps as well. And clearly we're going to be looking at analyzing the longitudinal results, and I think that's going to be really exciting for us as we can start to say, not just looking at averages from one year to the next, but we're actually going to be able to look at, specific growth for folks throughout their time in the organization. We're going to be able to look at, for that kind of first year cohort, how did they change throughout their time in the organization? We're going to be able to break that down based on who attended what programs, what types of experiences did they have, and really start to break down what are some of the things that are really driving positive experiences within the organization. I think we'll be able to incorporate, what we learned from that into our programming. Certainly, we'll continue to emphasize belonging within the chapter experience as that continues to be a priority. We'll be able to utilize this comparison data a little more, and I think a lot of compelling stuff that can come from that. I think we're only limited in this by the research questions we're able to come up with. So I think we'll continue to think about what is it we want to know so that we can analyze and process the data in a way that we can get some answers. And then I think another piece that we're looking at is continually wanting to work on how we can more effectively communicate the data back to you all, how we can get you messages and information that helps you understand it, but then also helps you utilize this data for chapter operations, for marketing, recruitment, to drive brotherhood programming and just get this information out there in a way that's really of value for the organization. So all that is kind of what we'll be looking at toward the future. So that's kind of just a quick, 30-minute overview on, where things stand right now in the assessment, and kind of a few thoughts on what we've learned, what we've gained, and so certainly want to take a minute just if anybody had any questions that they would like to ask or any other areas that they would like to dig into a little more in depth. Feel free to send those in. We'll give you a few minutes to think on that before moving on here. And I think also just as a follow-up on that, certainly if folks have any questions about this or you want to kind of process through this anymore, more than welcome to get a hold of me at the headquarters. Just give me a call or shoot me an email, and happy to jump on the phone or set up a meeting to talk to folks to process through this or talk through chapter reports and kind of brainstorm on what this might mean and what it is that we might do about this more in the future. So definitely always willing to talk about this and always open to feedback as to how we could get this information to you in a way where it would make sense to you and be useful for you. Certainly want to put it together in a way where it works best for you all, the end users. And I guess maybe just a final pitch. I think to the greatest extent that you can help us out in driving that strong response rate and really helping guys understand that this is important and this is something that's worth 30 minutes of their time to answer some survey questions and take it seriously, then we can hopefully be able to get you much better data to use on the back end. And so really want to try to get all those chapters up above 80% this year and really have some great data to work with. So with that, it looks like we did not have any questions come in. So I will say thank you for joining me this afternoon. Appreciate you all taking some time, and certainly look forward to providing you with some good data in the future, and we'll be excited to follow up with any of you if anybody has any questions down the road. So thank you all and have a good day.